Hi, everyone. It is indeed very good to be back. It's been a little while. I really enjoy doing these, and so it's nice to get a good crew today. A little bit on what these master classes are, what they're not, and how we're gonna do this. Let me pull the agenda up here. Okay. What you'll see here, we're going to go through a few things. We're going to go through why non-production environments are attractive targets, how hackers exploit dev and test environments. Those are going to be intermingled as we go through this. We always like to use real world examples and real world data, not stuff Fugue has just come up with, but although we do this for a living, we like to bring in other sources. So we're going to be talking about sources from Microsoft and the federal government and all kinds of places as to what happens and real world examples of this. We're going to make some recommendations. And this has a Q&A at the end. Ask questions anytime. These sessions are so much better when they're highly interactive. And, you know, if you want to challenge something I'm saying, that's fine too. Ask questions, you know, get a conversation going. This session was really inspired by a number of conversations I've had with folks in the field who have said things to me like, well, I don't need to run as much security in my dev and stage environments because they're not my production environment. And I always tell people like that's not true. And I'm going to go into detail as to why that's not true in this, but that's what inspired this was I'm out here looking at the real world breaches that are taking place, and at least half the time they are not production. They are I'll preemptively answer Douglas McElroy to the future questions. I'm not sure I got that one. You'll have to explain that. But I hope you walk away with today is at least the desire to really understand your security posture in your dev and non-prod environments and to understand what hackers are doing. So the purpose of these master classes is not to teach you everything possible to know on a topic. That's not possible in an hour. Also, I don't know everything there is to know on any topic, but I have been doing cloud security for about 10 years now. Originally in national security roles, and then I went to work for AWS, where I was a principal solutions architect focused on DoD and other NatSec, national security kinds of environments. And then I co-founded Fugue, and we are a cloud security company. So this is what I've done for a long time, and I think I have some insights that you'll find useful. What I'm trying to do is empower you to make your own decisions on these topics, right? So mastery is what you get to when you have your own ability to make informed decisions that are correct to the circumstances, right? There are no recipe books for getting security right. There aren't. You have to grok what's really going on and be able to make good decisions. So that's what I'm going to try to help you do here today. So a lot of times in these non-production cloud environments, they're not being included in compliance audits. Like when you go through a SOC 2 audit, the auditors are rarely looking there. And those audits, while painful, can often be helpful to understanding, how your security posture is looking. They are often not scanned for vulnerabilities. They are often not monitored as closely as production using tools like Fugue. They should be. We really designed our product to make it really easy to use across all these things because, boy, the hackers love dev environments. They love them, and they love them because of these reasons and others. You know, they lack adequate security controls. Well, adequate. The only way you can judge if something is adequate is if you don't get hacked. If you have so far not been hacked, so far it has been adequate. There is, again, no objective measure, but there's a lot of recommendations we can make, and there's a lot of kind of pointers we can give you. These environments commonly contain production data. I've worked in national security environments where absolutely no production data was anywhere except for in the production databases. that is a very difficult and expensive discipline, and very few commercial or even governmental or non-governmental that aren't purely focused on security actually pull this off. I will buy anyone a steak dinner who can prove that they have no production data outside of their prod environments, if you can prove it, and if you don't work in national security or a bank. Banks are good at this too, for the most part. Okay, so these things are increasingly featured in major breaches, and we're gonna get into that. I mentioned at the top, we really prefer for other voices to be in these presentations and not just give you our opinions, but let you know kind of where they are coming from. So there's a security researcher, blogger, developer, Orasi, and here software teams are under increasing pressure to deliver releases more quickly. Here he's talking about security budgets not rising. Meeting delivery timetables often takes precedence over security. Well, that is true. Security, kind of by definition, is what we used to call at Amazon undifferentiated heavy lifting, right? When you're thinking about where you're spending your cycles and therefore your money as a business, you really want to be, or as any organization with a mission. In business, that's got to be revenue, profitability, et cetera. In public sector, often that's other kinds of missions. But you want to be spending your expensive developer time on achieving your organizational goals, your business goals. Security is something that you have to do, but being secure itself doesn't add to your top line or increase the efficacy of your search and rescue or what have you. So very often it is a little bit of a second-class citizen. And then what happens is, really bad things happen. And when those really bad things happen, people start paying attention. So what I'm here to try to convince you is that it's much cheaper, much better to handle this stuff before you're in the news than after you're in the news. All right, so Microsoft put out this interesting post, which I'll show you in a minute. We'll go through a little more things in it, but this diagram really describes a dynamic that's very, very common, which is that your SDLC, your Cloud Development Lifecycle, CDLC or SDLC, you're going from research and then development, and then you go to staging and then production, right? The code, the application code, flows pretty much to the right, okay? And terminates in production. However, as you're building things, as you're building application code, very often data is being pulled from the right to the left. And there are very good reasons for this, very good reasons. Let me find that particular article. Let's go over here. Okay, good. So this is the article that is, so Principal Research Program Manager for Azure Security Center. So this is a guy who, Azure Security Center is another product, kind of like Fugue. This one's Azure specific, but that's what Tamir, I'm sure I mispronounced that, I'm sorry, is writing about here. He's an expert in this. This is what he does. Okay, so data is the holy grail of your cloud workload for attackers. Yes, it is. We all know that, right? Most of your sensitive data is in production environments, the environments you need to protect and usually do. But shift left testing is movement of testing to earlier stages in the development cycle. Well, to do testing, you probably need very realistic data. And what very realistic data means is probably real data in many cases. Now, I've built systems where we could touch no real data. And the price you pay for that decision, what you get for that in the development process, is if somebody hacks into your dev environment, it doesn't mean that much, right? Because there's no real data there. You're not exposing your customers, users, whomever, whose data you have to risk. But what the problem with it is a great many more bugs make it through to prod, okay? Because real data is messy. Real data is full of all kinds of kind of conditions that you would not think to kind of recreate if you were mocking data. The normal approach to getting away from use of production data is either to mock data or to mask data, and they both have some issues. So this is the fundamental problem with security in dev, is there is almost certainly production data somewhere in your dev world, and it's there for a legitimate reason. I'm not saying it's not just developers being annoying, it's them trying to do their job. Okay, let's keep going here. So this is an interesting one. This is a company called Imperva. And if you've watched other master classes, you'll know that I sometimes go into detail in the Thinking Like a Hacker class in particular, how Imperva, after this piece went up, I think this is in 2016, in 2018 or 19, they were breached with real customer data out of dev. Okay. So, and the reason I'm saying that isn't to beat them up. It's to say, even people who know better, it can happen in the organization, because these things are often so decentralized. And by the way, no human policy prevents this stuff. It just doesn't. You have to have policy as code. You have to have automation to really tell you what's happening out there. Okay. But here they're saying to facilitate proper development and testing, non-production environments need to accurately reflect production, of course. And so they often have the full range of supporting services, including databases. All right. So we see the issue, right? If you're thinking to yourself, well, I mean, prod is really what I need to protect. But the hackers know everything I'm teaching you. They know this. If I were a black hat hacker, I would just go after dev. And they do, because they know it's easier, because they know you think that. Okay. And they know the data's out there, whether you believe it or not. In this case, Imperva is specifically saying not to do this, but then it was happening there. And by the way, their CTO put out a really great blog post saying exactly what happened and all the things they did to correct it. They were like a model citizen after a breach. Now, the CEO had to step down. So going back to, is dev worth securing? I suspect he would say yes. All right. This Delphix survey, 62% of DevOps leaders, I'll jump down to the bold part. 80% of firms use and often store production data at some point in their development and testing activities. Now, I'm going to argue here that you can't test without production data. I don't believe you, it's not reasonably. You'll just be introducing bugs into prod. Unless you have just an exceptionally clean source of data that you know that about it. But that's rare. In the real world, data tends to be messy. So you're going to have production data out of the production environment. And the question is, where? How do you offer your developers access to prod data without rolling to prod, right? Because they're going to need that. And then also, how do you protect those environments where it's happening? So if you just say, unless you're in a really, really controlled environment like I've lived in before in national security or something, where policy actually really does take the upper hand and everybody knows you're fired if you do anything, step out of line. In most environments, if you don't give people access to the tools they need to do their job, they will give themselves access in order to do their jobs. They're not bad actors. The bad actor is the person telling them, you need to do this job and I'm not giving you the tools to do it. That is doomed to failure. So you have to provide access to production data in non-production environments. Now, I will argue that in development sandboxes, like at Fugue, and I recommend this as a practice, all of our developers have their own AWS accounts, right? You want that ability for developers to build stuff that only they can see, right? Developers, I've been well, I'm not a developer anymore, but I started being a programmer professionally in the early 90s. And, you know, I've been a software architect and programmer for many years, decades now. And, you know, you as a developer, as an engineer, or whatever you're going to call us, you want to learn things before you're exposed to the scrutiny of your peers. That's a natural thing, right? So when a new AWS or Azure service comes out, you're going to want to go kick the tires. You're going to want to experiment. You're going to want to be able to do dumb stuff, because you're going to, without everyone looking over your shoulder. So it's a really good idea for engineers, developers to have very, very liberally permissioned. Let them kind of do as much as you can possibly allow, but no production data. No production data. You have to have that place of near complete freedom for developers to be effective at their jobs. But what the cost of that is no prod data. And if there is, that should be a very serious offense, and that should be made clear to folks. But as you go through the SDLC and you get into, for example, a common development environment where you might be integrating the work of all those developers, or certainly wherever you're doing integration tests, right? You're going to start to need to pull some data in. And so those environments need to be secured and monitored much more like production, or like production. So this is a question of where you grant liberties to allow people to do their job, and where you give them access to high value assets in the form of data, high risk assets, and what they're allowed to do there, and making those policies clear. If you do it in a reasonable way, your developers will be on board, and they won't break those rules. So in 2019, Brent Ozar, a Microsoft certified master, did a big poll. Almost 1,000 software engineers found that 57% are using unmasked copies of production data in development and testing environments. Okay, I'm not making this up. This is far more common than not. All right, we're almost halfway through. I promised to do a few. I'm being long-winded today. Maybe it's because we haven't done one in a while, and I'm excited to be here. Let's do another image. Anyone got a preference? Video games, TV shows, movies, computers, more computers? Games. Okay, we got 2 games. We're going to do games. All right. How about this one? Not Final Fantasy. I think we got to give that to Eric. You said Nier Automata. It is what is it called? Nier Replicant or something? I think Nier Replicant. It's the precursor to Nier Automata. And the precursor was remastered recently and came out, and it's awesome. Highly recommend. All right, back to our topic. So when I'm talking about these let's go 1 or 2 more slides. Okay, yeah, this is what I wanted to get to here. EBS snapshots are the keys to the kingdom. So there are really 2 kinds of snapshots that I see commonly exploited in breaches coming out of dev. EBS is, of course, Elastic Block Store, which is the disk that you can attach to or run an EC2 instance from. It's virtual block storage, cloud block storage. So here you can say they have the access to your secret keys to your applications. Boy, I hope not. Don't be storing your secret keys on disks on EBS. Use the secrets manager, but it all too often is the case that they are stored there, and then they are living forever in these snapshots, right? When you get rid of the hard disk for your computer, you usually shred or wipe it completely, but these public EBS volumes are just left for anyone to take and start poking at. Well, making them public, let's show you a little bit of what is being talked about there. We'll go here. We're just at the AWS console here and looking at an EC2 instance. In fact, we are looking, I believe, at this guy. So what I'm showing you here is what we do for visualizing all this stuff in our product. And you can see here, I've got the IAM role, but if I'm looking at the EC2 instance, I will be able to, the root block device here, et cetera. So this is actually the EBS volume. So if I go over here, now in the old world, in the data center, hackers would try to get into a server to get data off the server. Okay, that does still happen, but it's really much less the case than what I'm about to show you here. So this disk and everything on it, including whatever's in the temp directory, right, including whatever's cached. If I go and say, where is it? Oh, do I need to go into the volume? I might need to go into the volume. You can tell I've been CEOing too long. It's made me a little dumb on tech stuff. I just did this earlier today. Let's see, storage, block devices. Here we go. I think this is where I need to be. All right, so this is an EBS volume. You can see it's an 8 GB volume. Now for this, I can just say create a snapshot. All right, and where's that? Does anyone know where that snapshot's going to go? Yes, Praneth. Hope I got your name right. It goes to S3. It goes to S3. Now, that snapshot has every bit that was on that disk. It is a DD if you're a Unix person, a Linux person. It is a direct copy of exactly the bits in the blocks on that disk. So everything is there. And it's stored as an object in S3 now. Now you have a slightly different way of getting access to this S3 object versus something in a regular bucket. It's a little bit different. But as a hacker, when I was going into a data center, this is the equivalent of stealing data from your backups, right? But in the data center, I probably didn't know what backup system you were using. Right, that was a organization by organization, or even team by team, in some cases, choice. So what hackers are looking to do, yes, Tori, you got it too. What hackers are looking to do is exert as little work as possible for as much effect as possible. And 90% of hacking is discovery. Also, I would argue 90% of security is discovery, is knowing what's going on. Well, if I'm a hacker and I can get into, through a CVE, I can get into a virtual machine sitting on a data floor, right, in a data center, a customer managed data center, I'm not going to try to hack the backup that it's talking to because I don't even know what it is. But in cloud, I do. I know these are snapshots. I know they're going to S3. And I know what the API calls are to get to them, and the command line calls are to get to them. So let's go right here. AWS CLI reference, copy snapshot. Right, once that thing's sitting there, I need IAM permissions for executing copy snapshot. That's a very common permission because it's very commonly used in the development process or DevOps in legitimate ways. But what this allows me to do is take that whole image and move it to another region. And ultimately, I can get it out of that account as well. Another thing I can do with these snapshots is convert them to Amazon machine images. Not sure I'll find that right here. Let's see, maybe it is right here. Let's go to this. I think it's in the snapshot. This guy. Okay, well, that's not done yet because I just kicked it off. But you can see here, grayed out in the actions is create image. Create image means Amazon machine image. Okay, and let's see if we've got one. Let's just get rid of that and see any. Okay, here we got some snapshots. So let's grab this one and we'll say create image. All right, I can give it a name, you know, my new Amy. And I don't really care about giving it a description. Oh, I've gotten my interface a little funky here. Let's do that. All right, and okay, so now I can go look at this machine image right here. It's private, but you know, maybe I just want to make it public. Okay, so I just went from a running disk to a snapshot to a publicly published machine image that I can use to build the same kind of server with all the exact same data, the same data anywhere I want to. All right. And I have not, well, let's switch to the whiteboard here. Okay, good. You're seeing my whiteboard. So what I just went into, right, was I've got my prod EC2 instance, and it's got an attached volume, of course. And in this case, it's probably talking to an RDS database or some such. Now, and then it's going to be coming in through an internet gateway. So I'll have legit traffic here, back and forth between these guys, and then, you know, out to the internet. Well, what I'm probably doing in prod, let's assume, since we're talking about exfiltrating prod data to non-prod environments, including other complete AWS accounts and regions. Well, in prod, I'm probably monitoring really closely like the network configuration and the database configuration and the EC2 configuration, and I'm probably monitoring the traffic that's going here. And I'm probably watching for drift. You know, this is all the stuff that Fugue does, help you monitor all this. But if what the bad guy's doing is trying to clone this thing over into some completely separate environment, and those steps are 1, snapshot, and 2, make AMI, and then 3 over here, build from AMI. Now, how are you going to notice this? Could anyone answer how you'd notice this? How do you know something bad is happening in this scenario? AWS has an answer. They say, watch the CloudTrail logs. The CloudTrail logs, right? Because all we have going on here are API interactions, no network traversals, nothing like that. So AWS say, watch the CloudWatch logs. Well, that will tell you once you've been breached that it happened. But the way to be aware of these things is to really limit access to the snapshot actions, AWS or Amazon or Microsoft or Google, you know, API calls, really limit that access. And also to constantly look at any new AMIs, any new snapshots, any drift in that environment. You should be able to account for every single object in your cloud environment, know who the owner is, know what it's there for. And if it's not intended to be there, it should be destroyed. And if it's no longer in use, it should be eliminated, right? So if on this EC2 instance, I'm using this particular IAM role, if that IAM role, and you can see it's on all 4 of these, if it is overly permissive to doing things like copy snapshot, I probably want to get an alert to that effect, right? Get some kind of warning to that before I end up in the news. Okay. I hope this is making sense. Not getting a lot of questions, but I hope I'm making sense to you and giving you some useful info. Let's keep going a little bit. So that's related to EC2 snapshots. Let's also talk about, well, this is just another comment on the very fact that using existing real world data is often the best solution for building stuff that works. Okay, and this goes back to an earlier point. Yep, again, from this P = NP article, Microsoft to enable advanced testing at earlier stages and allow for better analytics. Real data will keep being pulled out of production environments. Okay, and a lot of times, these data aren't just EBS snapshots, they're the other big kind of snapshots. Does anyone know what the other major kind of snapshot that hackers steal are? Okay, RDS. So when you are using RDS databases, which are awesome, and I highly recommend you use, very similarly to how EBS volumes have snapshot capabilities, so do RDS databases. And actually, the Imperva breach that did happen later, after they put that article out in 2016 and 18 or 19, the breach that actually occurred was from a snapshot of an RDS database. And in fact, the specifics here, let me just see if I can pull up that actual post, because there, as I said, their response to getting hacked was exactly how you should do it. Yeah, here we go. So this is right on their blog, their CTO, from their CTO saying what happened, trying to do the right thing, explaining it. Okay, how it happened. Yep, some key decisions were made during an AWS, they're saying, evaluation process. They were moving from a more traditional old school database to RDS, and the way they did that were and some of the decisions were: one, we created a database snapshot for testing. There it is. It's exactly what they did. They had a database running, created a snapshot, moved it over into testing, and then allowed an internal compute instance that was accessible from the outside world, containing an API key. All right, so that compute instance probably does not have access to log into that RDS database. That's not what the hackers did. Okay, what the hackers did here is they got into an internal compute instance. Very often in this kind of scenario, especially the word evaluation makes me think this, a lot more often in dev than in prod, you get people forgetting stuff, like leaving stuff laying around. And we call it orphaned infrastructure, or once hackers get it, zombie infrastructure. It's extremely common. I suspect, they don't say this, but I suspect that internal compute instance is probably something that they weren't really using that much. It probably moved on and weren't paying as close attention. And it contained an AWS API key. Okay, this compute instance was compromised. The API key was stolen. Okay, so we got an API key. And then the AWS API key was used to access the snapshot. All right, the AWS API key was not used to access the database. It was used to access the snapshot. So Ankit asks, so making snapshot images private is the right solution? That's a partial solution. This was probably private, right? This is almost certainly private, the snapshot. It was the AWS API key that was stolen from the compute instance that had permissions to access snapshots, meaning private ones, because if it's public, it's wide open. Then you're in trouble. So EBS snapshot is encrypted and created image is private. I mean, yes. So, but okay. So this is an interesting topic. When you get into the kinds of encryption used and can bad guys read it, you have to. It's a complex topic, and we probably can't drill too deep into it. However, I will say this: a very common pattern is for a single API key, right? Especially in dev, to have access to both snapshots and the KMS key that's needed to decrypt them. That is common, right? In fact, it's almost always the case. And so George saying less privilege is the solution. Don't give roles to manage snapshots to dev team. Well, in this case, there's no implication that they were given management of prod snapshots, right? It looks like an ops team created a database snapshot for testing from something in prod and handed it into dev. Okay, so within your dev environments, if you're doing much in your dev environments, you probably need very liberal IAM permissions, right? So this is a dilemma. There's no simple answer. You guys are right. You folks are right that you want less privilege and you want encryption turned on and you want things set private, but don't think that protects you. It does not. It helps. But a clever hacker who's getting into dev because they know there are more liberal permissions typically on the kinds of IAM roles that are attached to those API keys. I mean, what is that API key that was attached to that EC2 instance? I was just showing you that, right? So here we can see an EC2 instance, and in a given EC2 instance, it is typically going to have what's called a role policy attachment. And therefore, in either its metadata or perhaps on disk, although I hope it's not on disk, you're going to have an AWS API that comes with permission. So here's this particular role policy right here. So what the hacker is typically trying to do is find these more liberal permissions in dev, because you can't do dev without more liberal permissions, right? Not really, not effectively. And then looking for any kind of snapshots out there that they can see from the dev environment, which often have inherited data from prod. I'm not talking at all about escalations from dev to prod. I'm not talking about making any API calls against prod. I'm talking about purely what can happen just in dev. And I think that's a common misconception too, that the hacker is going to try to jump from dev to prod. Not usually. They're going to look at what data has made it to dev. Okay. So in your, oh boy, we're getting some questions out. That's awesome. Okay, let's see. Orphaned infra is a major issue. Orphaned infra is a massive issue. It is that's why we built this visualizer thing in part, so that you can just point this at your all your cloud accounts, AWS and Azure and Google, and very often, and we'll give you this whole diagram. Very often we'll have, it takes about like 10-15 minutes to do this the first time, so we'll often do it in a meeting, and somebody will say something like, what's that network? And the answer will be, oh, an intern built that last year. So it is very, very common. It happens all the time. All right, Okta ASA could help. Some, yeah, definitely. Multi-factor authentications in general, anything that makes it harder to use API keys. However, you're probably not using MFA when you're talking from one cloud resource to another. Think about where that API key was stolen to get the database snapshot. It wasn't stolen from a user. It was stolen from an EC2 instance that needed that to perform its function in the system. Okay, so could help, not so much often. All right, we see here from Period. I have EBS snapshot encrypted in my dev environment, and my image are always private when created from snapshot. So am I safe? Not necessarily. I mean, those are good things to do, but all I need is access to an IAM role attached to a policy that gives me access to that, whatever that KMS key you've used to encrypt it, and I can make a public one from there, right? So this is non-trivial. There's no simple answer. You really have to be aware of the whole situation. Can we access this visualizing app as a guest user? And then we got blaming the intern again. Yes, as the old graybeard, it's more often my fault than the intern, right? To be completely honest, but that's something that really did happen in a meeting when I said it. Okay, yes, you can access the visualizing app as a free user. Just go to fugue.co, and like I said, in 10 or 15 minutes, you'll depending on the size of your account, some of our customers, we manage millions and millions of resources, so but you'll get that diagram. You can do all the discovery on it and everything for free. All right, and then with remote operations, it's likely that both infrastructure and processes are optimized for remote access, right? potentially making it easier for criminals to steal clone production data. That's true. I would point out that when you're working in cloud, everything is distributed anyway, right? There is no such thing as non-remote. There's no such thing as local, unless you're like doing, one of those drop a micro region in your data center that like Microsoft and Amazon both do. Cloud is always distributed. It's on the API points are on the internet. I mean, you can configure them differently so that you have to go through more security. And so this is just the new reality. Okay, this isn't something that is going away, and that means we have to deal with the reality we're facing. I do want to show you a little more. This is kind of an interesting one. So this is more from Imperva about a Facebook vulnerability, account takeover hack. The hacker found a disconnect between production and testing beta environment of Facebook. First, he tried a brute force attack on the Facebook 6-digit code on the live website. And of course, he got blocked after a certain number of attempts. However, when he went to the testing URL, it didn't have any limitation on how many times you could try to log in, probably because that was helpful for testing. And therefore, he actually, he was able to view messages, credit, debit cards stored into the payment section, personal photos. So this is another point in why you really need to be using the same kind of security monitoring in your dev environments as you do in your production environments. Okay, no more internal. Amelia says no more internal versus external networks. That's true. I mean, when you're thinking about the kind of the good old days of security, you would focus mainly on these network boundaries and on the hosts inside of them, and you would segment, based on subnet and ACLs and all that. Everything I'm talking about here doesn't care at all about the TCP/IP address space, not at all. No packets are traversing any networks you can see in any of the stuff I'm talking about here. It's all API calls. Okay, Ankit says, I have VPN for remote operation. My dev environment is accessible only in office network. That's good, right? You can do that. There are ways you can do it with VPNs. There are other ways to do it. Those are good ideas. Most of the security conscious organizations that I've seen do this. So that is helpful. It isn't really necessarily an absolutely safe thing when you look at, for example, the Uber breaches where credentials were stolen from private GitHub repos and then used via external APIs, because a lot of these things are not network bound. They're API endpoint bound, right? So, and those APIs are like when I execute that command I was showing a second ago, where was it? Copy snapshot. That's on an internet API that Amazon is hosting. All right. So some of this stuff it is important to understand that your TCP/IP network boundaries are not going to save you anymore. It is the IAM permissioning, and particularly those of things running in the environments. A lot of people think about IAM as just the user access. I'm telling you, I see much more in real world hacks use of IAM policies and roles that are bound to things in the running environment than the ones that are granted to individual users. Okay, we will do one more background, and then I'm going to wrap up and turn it back over to Drew. He's got a few things to tell you about. Agree. IAM is my new network perimeter. Yes, IAM is the new network. It is the network that matters in cloud. I am so happy to hear that. Go zero trust. Absolutely. I mean, zero trust it's kind of like immutable infrastructure. It's sort of self-contradictory, but the philosophy of it is much better than having these trust relationships that houses of cards at this point. So I got to go through recommendations. I'll do this quickly. I've been making them all the way through. Make non-production environments inherit production security, and isolate the sandbox environments from a data provenance perspective. Only allow production data into those integration and test environments, and then secure those as hard as you do your production, and then give your developers a lot of freedom to experiment in sandboxes where you don't have production data. All right. Yeah, so the same security controls can and be maintained according to the same standards across places where you have prod data, right? I don't think that's absolutely true, but it should be the spirit of it. Like, if you need to be more liberal, be thoughtful about what you're doing and understand blast radius. Yeah, use infrastructure as code wherever possible and secure it. You know, we got a ton of features for, actually, we're pretty soon, we're the same visualization I was showing you will work on your Terraform and CloudFormation pre-deployment. But you know, we do a lot for checking infrastructure as code. If you're heavily using infrastructure as code, that can really help in terms of knowing if you're exposing yourself to risk all the way through the SDLC. All this stuff is caused by errors in cloud asset configuration. That said, you can't just do it there, because it is it is almost universal that even folks who think they're doing everything through infrastructure as code still have stuff happening, at the console. Means Lambda function infrastructure as code? No, we mean like Terraform CloudFormation. And we have a lot of capabilities here. This presentation isn't meant to be a sales pitch, but this is what we do, and we do it all the way through the software development lifecycle. Yeah, get that full visibility and maintain an audit trail. And Drew, you've got a minute and a half, and I think I can hear you now. I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. If anybody has any last minute comments or questions, please do shoot those to us in chat. If you want to follow up with us afterwards, Josh is josh@fugue.co. I'm drew@fugue.co. And so a little bit more time to get some Q&A in. We can go a couple minutes over. We often do. And just wanted to kind of point people to some resources that we have available to you. Again, the handbook on cloud security is fugue.co/handbook. Check out all of our other on-demand masterclass content at /masterclass. Josh briefly kind of showed a little bit about Regula. This is our open source infrastructure as code security tool. Works for Terraform and AWS CloudFormation, and can provide feedback to developers as they're developing their infrastructure as code. You can integrate this into CI/CD to perform automated checks to prevent compliance violations and misconfiguration from going out in the runtime. And the special thing about the Regula policy engine is with Fugue, you can use those same policies to continuously monitor and check your runtime environment. So you're not using one tool and set of policies for infrastructure as code and another for the runtime. So check that out. It's regula.dev is our doc site for the Regula project. And you can learn all about how to use that, get up and running as well. And then with Fugue, we offer the Fugue guarantee. Within 15 minutes, you'll get a full actionable cloud compliance assessment for your AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud environment. Includes that really cool, detailed, interactive map of your environment, every compliance violation that you might have for any number of compliance families out there. And if you work with us, we will guarantee that you will be able to bring your cloud into compliance in 8 weeks. So shoot us an email if you want to get started on that, do a workshop, learn more, sales@fugue.co.
Thank you all for joining us, and you can go to fugue.co, that's .co, to get more information, and we'll see you next time.